And while we're panning, showing you a selection of dolls from the Jumeau Company from 1878 to 1895, I want to read to you something from the Jumeau book written by Francois Timer and the English edition edited by myself. This is from the prologue written by Francois, and the summary of it, I believe, sums up so poignantly the life and work of Emil Jumeau that it bears attention. So I'm going to be reading while we're looking at the dolls. In March 1899, the simple signing of a legal document brought an end to the personal reign of Emile Louis Jumeau in the realm of the doll. This act gave concrete reality to his desertion of the field in which, buffeted by adversity, he was no longer willing to struggle. It was a defeat for the enterprise which bore his name and for the inheritance received from his father, which he was able to develop into one of the models of 19th century French industry. On that day, in the company of his wife, Jumeau saw the company he had built vanish in an instant. He signed it over to SFBJ. It was an endeavor he no longer felt up to, even though it had been his life for so many years. He must have felt somewhat responsible. Had he not personally abandoned the manufacturing of dolls years ago in order to devote his time to another hobby? And had he not made up his mind long ago to sell his business? These are sufficient to explain his reasons, but he really hadn't wanted to solve his problems in just this way. The name Jumeau had become synonymous with the doll in its broadest sense, and he had placed his indelible stamp on his century and on the French toy industry. Bébé Jumeau had crossed national frontiers and reached the hearts of several generations of children, with the result that the name Jumeau came to have a magical aura about him. To be sure, he was not the first creator of bébés. Far from it. Nevertheless, it is to Jumeau's business ability that we must credit the popularity of the new style doll. In this, he was a precursor of the great modern advertisers. The name Jumeau achieved wide currency through the bébé which bore that name, and by means of distribution methods far in advance of the period. He would now have more time for his family. He thought about marrying his daughters to their best advantage. He had no male offspring to continue on the business. While the assembled notaries delivered a soothing reading of the company's charter documents, the mind of Jumeau must have flown far away behind the pages of his study window. He recalled his father, that upright, proud, and scrupulous man who used to recount his memories to family members, evenings at the house in Longny that he chose for his retirement. And then the book goes into and relates the first half of the Jumeau book, which I'm going to show you in a minute. Francois has gone to great lengths to detail the background of the family and the history of the family, the tragedy of the older son dying and Emil Jumeau stepping in, and then his extraordinary work in marketing and advertising and distribution. The fact that they built the first factory for the complete production of a doll in one site. So many things that he did were really precursors of what we here in America call our Henry Ford type of work, and the advertising that we always feel so famous for. But Jumeau was way ahead of everybody in this. This was in the 1880, 1890 era, and he was absolutely remarkable. There's the biographical information about the man is quite interesting too. He was, I guess you could, I don't want to call him a player, but he liked his social life. And he was a family man, yes, but he also was involved in many social endeavors and activities. At one point, he decided that in order to revive a flagging reputation, he wanted to have a Legion of Honor, and he worked with people to help him try to get it, and indeed, he was awarded the very prestigious French Legion of Honor medal, which he cherished all of his life. He was quite an intriguing man, left an intriguing legacy behind him, and I'm always proud to show his work because I think it's many great pieces. And I want to tell you now, the dolls that you're looking at here, you think of Jumeau. When I ask you, Jumeau, when was he? And you just kind of, in your mind, because his name is so prominent, you're going to tend to think, he must have made dolls. He must have been for 100 years. They must have made dolls. No, the dolls that you're seeing here, earliest 1877, latest 1895. That's what, do the math, 20 years. That's absolutely extraordinary. In 20 short years, granted the company had existed before then, but when he took over the reins of the company, 1877, and basically started backing away in the early 1890s, and then signed over the company to SFBJ, just signed it all away, the rights to the company in 1899. But the scope of his dolls were really done in that 20-year period. All of the models, all of the styles, all of the marketing. He did, I'm going to show you just an example. This is in this auction in 1900. Now the company is signed over to SFBJ, but the Jumeau name was still used by SFBJ, and these were the dolls that were exhibited at the Paris International Exposition, and many of them are going to be the type of dolls that you see here. In fact, the rare Jumeau character that we showed early, there are some Jumeau characters that were shown in this series of postcards that he did for that exposition. Well, let's look and talk about the dolls that are here. We'll start on the top with this little girl over here on the left. This would be one of his earliest dolls, and it is known, depending on the style, depending on your feeling of what you want to call it, variously as premier or portrait. It was the first of the bébés. It would have been of the type that would have been exhibited by Jumeau at the 1878 Paris Exposition, and would have been of the type where he received a gold medal at that exposition. Many people, new collectors, always wonder, well, my doll was made in 1878 because it has a stamp on the back that says 1878. And I have to tell them, no, that's the year he won this first gold medal, and he used that stamp, well, pretty much thereafter throughout his career. Changed it a few times, but mostly that stamp, Medal d'Or 1878, will be on the back of his doll bodies, authenticating that he was the maker of the dolls. The early models, this one and her wonderful sister next to her, are always very, very notable for their very, very large, striking eyes. And they're very beautiful. One of the things you'll notice as you go along in the age period of the dolls is you'll notice there is a, in a factory when someone's standing over and watching the standards of production, everything has to be exact the same. That perfected as time went on with the company. In these very early models, you're going to find much more like one-offmanship. It was much more hands-on, individual people doing it. And so sometimes you'll find little variations in eye cuts or in painting. And what you look for are ones that really strike out at you, that have personality, that have beauty, that have artistry. And the two little dolls I'm showing at the bottom absolutely do exhibit that type of thing. Their eyes are striking and absolutely remarkable. One of the things that had allowed Jumeau to move quickly into his bébés was there had been a very famous early déposé, what we would call a patent, on a body made with 8 loose ball joints for articulation by a Frenchman, and that patent expired in 1877. And so guess what? It was immediately picked up by Jumeau for the making of his early doll bodies, and that's what we tend to find. And then we have our third doll in, and she's a very wonderful doll, and she falls in the category of also being a portrait doll by Jumeau. The early dolls, very, very notable for their, if you're looking at all of them here and you're doing comparisons, look at the very pale complexion, very, very delicate complexion with very soft blushing. One of the things that I find very remarkable about the eyes, and I always look for it now lately, because I found that the companies that really wanted to pop the eyes out. They would tend to make a very thick, dark eyeliner around the eye sockets, and then the lashes coming off from it. And sometimes the lashes could almost be not as pronounced because the eyeliner is what they almost framed the eyes and popped them out. And also look at the various blush that you'll see on the eyelids of the dolls, and that's quite prominent to find. Then we come to our fourth little doll over, and she's quite remarkable because she is wearing an early Jumeau costume, and she's really, really wonderful. She's another portrait, and yet it's interesting. It's like she's only marked with a size number, but if you look at her complexion, what do you notice in comparison to the last one? Much rosier. It's a darker complexion. So it sort of would be like at the end of that portrait time period. So we're starting in 1877, kind of edging into 1878 in this time period. Now we have the wonderful, now next to her, a very almost different kind of look to her face. Just compare her to the other dolls along on that top shelf, and you can see the whole expression is starting to change. Very much the modeling is not that different. It's the painting, the eyes, the shading, but a different look. And she has that mark 12X. So far, we don't know what that X means, 12X. It seems to have only been found with the size 12, but it's a very distinctive look to her, very entrancing large eyes. Beautiful original wig on her as well. Next to her, a very important doll, because it is now, if you've noticed all of the dolls I've shown you up until now, nowhere do they bear any name at all of Emil Jumeau on the doll, except on the signature on the body. But somewhere along the line, Emil Jumeau kind of got the clue, hey, I think other people are copying my dolls. He definitely noticed this at the Antwerp International Exhibition, in which he showed dolls, and when he went there, he saw that there were many German dolls there, some of them even being called Jumeau, not his dolls. So he decided he better get on the ball and start protecting his dolls. He was so busy marketing and producing and being successful that he didn't stop to think he had to protect his business. So he did. And he produced this doll, which is marked EJ, and then below that, A, EJA. It was only made in 2 sizes, and it's very curious because by this time, the Jumeau company had its porcelain works in Montreuil, and they were making their own heads, and they sometimes made them on commission for other people, and they made a Schmidt Bébé that looks exactly like this doll, which is also very curious since he went so much to the trouble of marking his doll EJA. So we don't know what the backstory behind that is, but quite interesting. So now I talked to you before about it's important that we start paying attention in the doll world to knowing more about the sculptors of who designed the dolls, and not just assume that they were kind of like hacking them out to get ready for that year's production. There were artists that were working to design these dolls, and sometimes they were big names. And your big girl in the blue on there is the work of the design of Albert Carrière-Belleuse of Paris. Very, very famous Parisian sculptor. He was in the waning years of his career, and Jumeau commissioned him to design an important doll head for him, which we call today the Bébé Triste. It came out, it appeared in sizes from 9 to 16, and size 20 is known, which was only an exhibition model. This is the very rare size 16, very, very seldom found, and absolutely gleaming doll. It won so many prizes at the time, and rightfully should have. So we started here in 1877 on this top, and we have now moved up only to 1883. That's 5 or 6 years, and all of these Jumeaus that we know and love and the different names we look for, we kind of assume automatically, though, they must have been made over decades of time. No, a window, a tiny, tiny window of time that they were made. Let's move down to the bottom section again now, and let's start with the dolls that are here. And we're looking here, I want to show you, and this one I'm going to turn around because I want to show you the mark on the back of the head. And it has the lettering, and I don't know if the camera can pick it up because it is very, very faint. It says Tete Jumeau. It's incised writing, Tete Jumeau. This was made for maybe 1 or 2 years only, about 1883. And it's a kind of a different look to it in my way. It's the same model, but here's how I always describe it when I'm describing it in the catalog. This is another example of the Bébé Tete Jumeau. It has a very shy look compared to some of the others they're out there. This one, particularly the girl with the brown eyes, it really shows up on her. And maybe there's smaller eye cuts, but a very hesitant, shy expression. These are two very, very beautiful dolls. This model was only made for 1 or 2 years, so when you can find an example with that marking, it's a real treasure. Then we come along to the beginning. Now remember I mentioned to you the EJA up above, and I said that Jumeau was realizing he needed to start marking his dolls, so he wanted to start marking his dolls with the initials EJ. And one of the very first of them it's marked with the letter C above and then below it EJ, so it's known as the CEJ. Again, very few examples of this are known. And this, by the way, is a little doll that I wanted to point out to you, her costume, that this is the same needlework that appeared on the Bébé Gigateur that I showed you earlier. And it was a costume. We have had several dolls over the years that have had original trousseaus that came with them at the time, presumably all from either the Jumeau factory or a store where they might have been bought at the time. And this is an example of one that would have been on an original Jumeau. That's a very beautiful doll. Then the EJ dolls continued. So this is CEJ, but this is also EJ. And this is the second. EJs were made for, dolls marked EJ were only made for, I think, 3 or 4 years. And they went through 3 different periods, and this was the beginning of them. She has the very desirable loose ball jointed body with the straight wrist, and this is marked with the number above and then EJ letters below. But look at the difference between these two. Fascinating. Now, EJ, however, changed, and this is also an EJ. And if you know your Jumeaus, if many of you who collect them, if you look at that doll, you're going to tell me, I'm going to say, what model of Jumeau, what model of Jumeau do you think that is? I bet 9 of 10 of you who know your Jumeaus will say, oh, that's a Tete. No, it's not a Tete. It's a marked EJ. It's very, very curious. Again, I point this out because I keep dwelling on it, and I know I'm sounding like a broken record, but we're talking a short period of time here, folks, a very short period of time. Actually, the important time for Jumeau was really 1878 to 1892, which expands it even to a shorter period of time when I was talking about, because after 1892, we're going into a lot of store production, not anything really new, but just production for other people. So here we have a doll that is marked EJ, but looking like a Tete. What she also has that you can't see is she has the lady model body. So it would have like a bosom and a shapely waist, and still have, however, the shorter, the typical arms of the Bébé. So only the torso was made as a lady shaped in order to accommodate a particular type of costume. But okay, look what happens next. There's her gentleman friend standing next to her. He is a marked Tete Jumeau, stamped Tete Jumeau, and this is after 1886. Basically, that became the Jumeau production, the Tete Jumeau. And he has, this is really curious to me, he has also the lady-shaped body, but he has it, I believe, because he has that fitted marquee costume with everything is snug to the body. So in order to get it to really fit and to look like a dandy, they used the lady body on him. But he is a marked Tete Jumeau. Then I have a little Tete Jumeau next to him, and I wanted to show you this. because this is what you dream of finding, ladies and gentlemen. This is in her original costume. Totally original, from the hands of Ernestine Jumeau, who was in charge of all of the costume production and ordering of silks and the costume design at the Jumeau factory. That was what she did. And this is one of her original dresses. And when you can find a Jumeau in an original dress these days, you just grab it up, because they are getting harder and harder and harder to ever find. And she is an absolute prize, including her little original shoes with the gold lettering, and including her Jumeau earrings, and including her Jumeau wig. And it's absolutely wonderful. And then standing next to her is her tiny little sister with these big dramatic eyes. And she is a Tete Jumeau, but again, just the same model over and over and over again. That's basically what it was, with certain exceptions, like the EJA is different and the Triste is different. But basically we have the same model with variations in decoration, in the size of the eye cut, in the type of the eyes. And here's a tiny girl with big dramatic eyes that is absolutely wonderful and almost harkens back. I'm going to move her up here for a minute and show you. Almost harkens back to her earlier sister, which is great to have. Now, we talked before how Jumeau had been making heads for Leopold Lambert for his art character automatons he wanted to have, the crying children, the laughing children, the different moods. But also, Leopold Lambert used basic stock heads from Jumeau, just a basic Tete Jumeau, but with the neck cut flat, so it would accommodate to the automaton. And this is an example of how Tete Jumeau also found a profit center by supplying heads to various automaton makers. And this particularly charming one, little girl is divided between looking in the mirror at herself or playing with her doll. And that's what the charming mechanism is all about. Flip the pages forward and we come up to 1892, and kind of like the world stopped for so many reasons. There were a lot of things going on at the world at that time. You know, we have tariff problems today, but I got to tell you, there were serious tariff problems in 1892 when major tariffs were put on goods coming into the U.S., and it changed a lot of the way doll production went. For example, dolls started being offered in simpler costumes because they weren't in their lavish silks and fineries that caused them to have great expense and also heavy tariffs. That's when Jumeau introduced in 1892 his dress that we refer to as the muslin flower dress, either in rose or blue, because it was a very, very simple muslin dress and it kept the cost of it down. And people, basically, they called it uncostumed, and so it was able to come in at a much cheaper rate. But also, new periods came out because we talked about the series Fantastique that Jumeau introduced. Now, one of the dolls that is quite interesting is the doll here known as the Paris Bébé, stamped Paris Bébé. So Jumeau was, I told you, he didn't always keep his attention on his business, quite frankly. And one of his employees decided to head out of the company and basically stole a lot of information with him. And he went out and started making his own dolls and basically kind of calling them Jumeau's for every way, intent and purpose. Jumeau started a lawsuit against him, and they got into a lawsuit. He called his doll Paris Bébé. Jumeau won the lawsuit, so he took the name Paris Bébé to make it his own, but he made his own doll head for it. And his doll head is the doll you're seeing right there, that famous Paris Bébé by Jumeau. A very, very different face than all of the others here, if you've noticed, but he did it specifically. And some people consider it kind of like the beginning of the series Fantastique because it has such characterization. During this time also, because he was trying to keep his company afloat, he started making dolls for various department stores, They would not even be marked on the back of the head. It would just have a white spot where the mark Tete Jumeau usually appeared, and the store could put their own label on it for the Bébé Louvre or that type of thing, whatever the store was, whatever they wanted to do. And this one, and some of them actually used initials, and this one is marked on the far right. The doll is marked BF on the back of the head, and a special commission doll that Jumeau made. So you're seeing a period of dolls that Jumeau made, and I wanted you to see them because I wanted you to see they're so different and yet they're so alike. And just always keep remembering this short-lived period of time that these dolls were made. It's absolutely remarkable. And he did become the keynote throughout the world for the childhood doll, the Bébé.